This is Bill's first try at a faux marble tabletop. I like it.
The previous video in this series, I mentioned that we hadn't decided on the color for the table and the counter. Since Sherry's suggestion of solid gold would not be practical, we decided gold metal flake would be the way to give her her gold. We received no compensation for the use of or mention of products or companies in this video. I spent several hours watching videos on how to coat tables and counters with clear epoxy and make it look like marble. Since this would be my first try at using epoxy tabletop coatings, I wanted to make some samples to practice on. And I had some leftover plywood from the project that I just cut up to make some panels that I could practice on. I started by using some latex interior house paint and primer colored with the base color of what I call chocolate. All of the colors and materials I used are detailed in the description below along with links. I put 2 coats on the sample panels, sanding in between. All the samples and the table had the same color as a base. This was the result of my first try on the samples. This one, I just added a small amount of the gold flake to the first coat of epoxy and spread it out. Not the look I was trying for, but it had some possibilities. This was my second try. On this one, I used the same mix as on the first, but then added some white marbling to it. This was closer to what we wanted, but still was not there yet. For this one, I used a clear first coat of epoxy and then drizzled the gold flake mix and white mix on top, then worked them to give the marbling effect. This was much closer to what we wanted. This was the one that put us closest to the effect. It was the same process as the third sample, just using less of the white mix. This is how the tops looked just after the latex paint. This is what I did to get the finish we wanted. I started by breaking the surface of the latex paint. This makes it smoother and the epoxy will have fewer, if any, craters known as fish eyes. To do this, I started by scraping it with a metal putty knife. This is faster than sandpaper for this stage, as it levels the surface at the same time. After scraping, I used 320 grit sandpaper to smooth it further. After sanding, I masked off the oak edges and the tracks for the drawer slides. This also held the table in place on the work table. Then in the slot for the hinge. The epoxy I bought from Amazon as a 2-part 1-gallon kit. Part A is the epoxy and Part B is the hardener. These are mixed 1-to-1. In this case, I mixed 6 ounces of Part A and 6 ounces of Part B. Then I used a paint mixer on my drill to thoroughly mix the 2 parts together. Then I poured the mix on the table and started to spread it around with my wide blade putty knife. In many videos that I watched, they used a notched trowel for this. But I couldn't find one that would be small enough to fit in some of the areas on the counter that I'm going to be doing. So I used the putty knife instead to practice using it to accomplish the same thing. Then I used a paintbrush to even out the epoxy on the surface, just tapping it on the surface to let the ridges from the putty knife even out. With that done, I used my hot air gun to flow out the epoxy and to help remove the bubbles. This is what gives the coating a crystal clear look. You remove the bubbles. For the gold metallic flake, our friend gave me a small sample of a gold. I just mixed less than 1/4 teaspoon of this into about 2 ounces of the same epoxy that I had mixed for this project. With it mixed together, I just drizzled it on to the still wet epoxy. Next, I did the same with some Rust-Oleum gloss white spray paint. Just a little squirt of the spray paint on the mixed epoxy, then mixed together, gives a translucent white that's just drizzled onto the table. Then I used another putty knife to lightly spread the colors out. This is more of a blurring the edges than anything, and this is part of what gives this method the look of marble. Then I used the heat gun to help flow out the epoxy and to remove the fine bubbles. The gold metallic really started to pop out as the bubbles were removed. You could see it clearly. The heat gun has to be moving all of the time or it's going to burn the epoxy. A little brushing along the edges to remove any drips and sags on the sides and to even this out. Because I still had some clear mix left, I decided to put some more on the top of everything. This gave it some thickness to the epoxy. And of course, more heat gun. This is how it looked 24 hours later. Yes, it still looks wet, but it's not. The coating is a little soft still, but it will harden in another day or so. Then I can wet sand it to get the bugs out, and I want to add another coat of clear to that just to make it look deeper. But that'll be another video.
Thanks for watching our video. If you like what you see, press the like button below and subscribe. And also check out our other videos.